Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I am your host, as always, Nathan, and today we're going to be breaking down the draft classes for the AFC East. But before we go ahead and get into the actual draft class breakdowns and rankings, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to please like, comment, and subscribe on this video. It would really help out the channel if you did. And now, with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's let's get started with the Buffalo Bills. The Bills had the most picks out of anybody in this video here today. Also was a bit of a mixed bag. They had a double trade down. They allowed Kansas City to trade up and get Xavier Worthy, and then they allowed Carolina to get a fifth-year option on Xavier Legette. I would not have made the second trade. I probably wouldn't have even made the first trade because I probably would have stayed put and taken Xavier Worthy for the simple fact that he really had no business ending up on the Kansas City Chiefs roster, but he did. Nevertheless, I'm not going to take those trade downs into account when grading this first pick, which was, of course, wide receiver Keon Coleman. I had a top 40 grade on Keon Coleman, really liked his upside as a jump ball receiver, but also as someone with after-the-catch ability. His combine performance was a mixed bag. He did really, really well in some areas, specifically the field test drills. However, in the athletic testing, he did kind of leave a lot to be desired. He didn't jump or run as well as I expected him to. Nevertheless, I settled on a top 40 grade for him. I was very high on him throughout this whole process. I thought that he borderlined as a first round lock for me, which would have been a top 20 grade. Fell down a little bit after the combine, as we discussed, but I still really, really like Keon Coleman. However, he was taken in the top 40, so this pick grade is a B, even though I really, really like the player, and I do think he has the ability to end up being a wide receiver one at the next level. Cole Bishop, a safety out of Utah, was Buffalo's next selection, and I had a fourth round grade on Cole Bishop. I potentially see starting upside here with him, but I don't see it right away. Now, I get that the safety class was real weak and real bad, and this is going to be a theme throughout this video, is the safety positions getting reached on quite a bit, but I still believe that there were better players at bigger positions of need for this team than Cole Bishop. I had a fourth round grade on him. You took him inside the top 75. The grade is a C+. I do think it is quite a bit of a reach, even though I do think he has starting safety upside. I do think that's probably 2 or 3 years down the road. Next pick, Dwayne Carter, an interior defensive lineman out of Duke. I will say I had him graded as a 3 technique rather than a nose tackle, even though I do think he is a little bit of a tweener. That being said, I had a fourth round grade on him, and you taking him inside of the top 100. This is a significant reach, and there were several better players at that position, in my opinion, still available at this time, especially players that could fulfill a singular role rather than being kind of a tweener that could maybe do both in specific circumstances. All in all, I don't really like the pick and I don't really like the fit. The grade for me is a C+. Up next, entering day 3, here you have Ray Davis, a running back out of Kentucky. In a vacuum, I think Ray Davis has the potential to be a quality backup running back to James Cook, who I believe made the Pro Bowl this year. High quality player, really like James Cook a lot. However, Ray Davis, this is a little bit of a reach for me. I had a 5th round grade on him. I do think he is someone that can handle carries at the next level and has upside both as a pass blocker and a pass catcher. However, he really just kind of seems to me like a jack of all trades, master of none type of player. And generally speaking, I am lower on those types of guys than players who can do one thing at a really high level, especially on day 3. However, I did have a 5th round grade on him as a pick in the 4th. Not that bad of a reach. I do think he will contribute day 1. The grade is a B-. Cedric Van Pran was the next pick at 141st overall. In terms of pure value from where I had that player graded to where they were taken, this might be the best pick of the entire draft. I had a top 75 grade on Cedric Van Pran. I think he's a starting center in the NFL year 1 with very, very good player upside, maybe kind of like a borderline Pro Bowl type of player. I really like the pick. I think this is going to help this team tremendously in year 1. I think he has more upside as a center than a guard, but he could also play guard in a pinch. This pick is one of the best picks that we're going to talk about in this video here today, and it is graded as an A+. Edefuan Ulofushio, a linebacker out of Washington. This is another guy that I actually really liked. I think I was higher on him than the consensus, and I think the Bills also were. I think most people had a sort of borderline draftable grade on him, although generally speaking, I am kind of a sucker for undersized, quicker linebackers just because generally speaking, I like those players a lot. But Ulofushio was very, very good for Washington. He was a major reason that that defense was even remotely okay against the run. Like, they were kind of bad against the run, but if they didn't have Ulofushio, it would have straight up been a liability. He made a lot of plays for that team above the X's and O's. Tremendous instincts as a player. I think he has upside as a nickel linebacker or a dime package linebacker, and an elite caliber special teams player day 1. I had a 5th round grade on him, and you guys took him in the 5th round, so the grade is a B. Up next, one of my favorite players of this class, Javon Solomon, a linebacker / edge rusher out of Troy. Now, unfortunately, in the linebacker portion of my top 10 defensive player by position rankings, I lost the audio for that section. I think I don't really know what happened. I don't really remember, if I'm being honest with you. But I had him graded as a top 100 player as a Sam linebacker because I thought he had a significant amount of upside in a blitz-heavy sort of Baltimore Ravens style-esque scheme. Buffalo doesn't really do that, and the early smoke on his role is that he's going to be a rotational pass rusher. As an edge rusher alone, I had him graded as a 4th round pick. If I was sort of getting the vibe that he was going to be more of a Sam linebacker who blitzed a lot and that's how he rushed the passer, I had a top 100 grade on him as a linebacker. So this pick probably would have been graded higher if I had gotten that vibe that he was going to be a linebacker. But the early smoke coming out of the NFL here and rookie camps that are going on right now is that Javon Solomon is going to be an edge rusher for them. So the grade is graded as a 4th round pick. You got him in the 5th round. Good value, B+. Dylan Grabble, offensive tackle out of UCF. I had a 7th round grade on him. I don't have a whole lot to say. I think he has potential as a backup offensive lineman. Not necessarily someone that I see being a starter long term in the NFL, but maybe he could end up being somebody who you put out there and he's just not a liability at the position, which is really all that you can ask out of a backup offensive lineman. I had a 7th round grade on him. He took him in the 6th round. The grade is a B-. Up next, another absolutely fantastic pick in terms of value from where I had them graded and where they got drafted. Daquan Hardy, a slot corner out of Penn State. I really, really like him. I think this is a plug-and-play player in the slot or potentially even as a safety for this defense. And I think he's got upside as a special teams player as well. But more so, I think he's going to provide value actually playing defense year one. I had Hardy graded as a top 100 grade. Getting him in the 6th round at 219th overall is tremendous value. That pick is an A+ grade for me. Your last pick in the 7th round, only 2 picks after you took Hardy, is Travis Clayton, an offensive tackle out of the international player pathway for the NFL. I didn't have a grade on him for obvious reasons. He came out of the international player pathway program. So I didn't know he existed before he was selected in the NFL draft. And generally speaking, with those kinds of guys, I just sort of count them as a B, as a pick at value, and then move on with the grade. If you want to see the overall grade for this team, you can go ahead and skip to the end of the video, or you can stick around for the next 3 teams and see how I think about your division rivals. Up next here is the Miami Dolphins, and we're going to start off with the 1st round pick, 21st overall. You guys selected Chop Robinson, an edge rusher out of Penn State. I was much higher on Chop Robertson than the consensus was, even though, generally speaking, players that don't get a lot of sack production in college don't tend to get a lot of sack production in the NFL. However, when it comes to Chop Robinson, I think a lot of the plays that he made don't show up on the stat block because there were a ton of other good defensive linemen on that Penn State team, not necessarily NFL guys. Now, Adisa Isaac was very, very good across from him this past year, but there were quality, and not even quality, like really good college level players across that defensive line. They went 6, 7, 8 deep this past year, and there were a lot of other players that made plays in cleanup from Chop Robinson actually creating some sort of disruption in the backfield. A tad bit undersized, but an extraordinary athlete. I had a top 20 grade on him. Getting him at 21 is in fact a pick after value, because a top 20 grade means value is from picks 11 to 20. So the grade is a B+ because it's a pick after value. Your 2nd round pick, Patrick Paul, 55th overall, an offensive tackle out of Houston. And I like Patrick Paul. I had a top 75 grade on him. I think this is someone who's a future starting offensive tackle with a good amount of upside as a prospect. I'm not necessarily sure he's got like Pro Bowl upside or anything like that, but I would be surprised if he wasn't at least a very good starter in the NFL. One of the safer prospects, in my opinion, just really seems like a guy that's going to work out in at least a decent way. Probably going to play right tackle for you guys, potentially a future left tackle as well, but he'd have to be really, really good at right tackle in order to potentially get moved to left tackle. All in all, I had a top 75 grade on him. You guys took him between picks 51 and 75. This is a pick at value. The grade is a B. You guys did not have a 3rd round pick. Instead, you had a 4th round pick, which was Jalen Wright, a running back out of Tennessee, who's very fast. He ran in the 4.3s, but also has a good amount of size to him. I believe he's 5'10" and around 200 pounds. So he's not a scat back, so to say. He is someone who can take the hits a little bit more. And this, to me, was not so much a pick for this year, but rather a pick for next year, as Raheem Mostert is, in fact, getting a little bit older, and you don't know how long he is going to be able to keep up the production that he has been giving you last year. And you don't know if he's going to be able to give you that this year, as well as Devon Achane, who has been hurt for the most part in his 1 year of NFL experience, even though he was arguably a top 5 running back in football when healthy. But he was hurt for the vast majority of this past year. So Jalen Wright, I think, is probably going to end up being the workhorse back going forward, with A-Chain coming off the bench and being that change of pace guy, because Wright is normal levels of very fast, and Devon A-Chain is ridiculous levels of very, very fast. All that being said, I had a top 75 grade on Jalen Wright. He was my 4th overall running back, and you got him in the 4th round. This is a big time steal, in my opinion. The grade for this pick, for the fit, for the value, is an A+. Your 5th round pick, 158th overall, was Mohamed Kamara, an edge rusher out of Colorado State. This is a guy that I like. I like him a lot. I had a 4th round grade on him. This is someone who I think has starting edge rusher potential at the next level in either a 3-4 or a 4-3 scheme. I think he's got upside in both. However, I do think he's probably better off in a 3-4, which is a good thing because that's what you guys run for the most part. But I had a 4th round grade on him, and you took him in the 5th round. That is a pick after value. The grade for me is a B+. Your first of 2 6th round selections, Malik Washington, a slot wide receiver out of Virginia. This is one of the guys that a lot of people talked about being like a day 3 steal. I wasn't necessarily on board with that sort of thing because I had him graded as a 4th round pick. So that's where I thought he was going to go. Then I would have been like, oh yeah, this is a guy who I think is going to be a quality and productive wide receiver 3 working in the slot. And from what I can remember, most people had him in that early day 3 sort of conversation. But for one reason or another, he ended up falling down into the 6th round here. This is a good pick with a good amount of value for me. I think he's a relatively safe prospect. I would be surprised if he wasn't at least a quality 4th wide receiver in the NFL. But I do think he has more upside than that as well. This pick for me is graded as an A-. Your 2nd 6th round pick was Patrick McMorris, a safety out of Cal. And this is really the only pick that you made that I didn't agree with, really. I don't like him enough to have a draftable grade on him. I had a priority undrafted free agent grade on him. That being said, I was, generally speaking, very, very low on this safety class. I really did not like this safety class all that much. And there was also a plethora of safeties available on the market that I felt like just would have been better options that are still, as of the time of me recording this, unemployed. Like Justin Simmons, I think, just got signed yesterday or the day before that. I don't remember. But there's still several other, I think, starting caliber safeties. And in the draft, for whatever reason, people decided that they were going to take a lot of safeties on what I have graded as reaches. So that's kind of pushed everybody up the board here. So you've got someone who I have graded as a undrafted free agent grade to getting drafted in the top 200 picks. I don't know. I don't like it that much, but it's also a 6th round pick, so it's not the end of the world. I have it graded as a C+. Your final pick, 241st overall in the 7th round, was wide receiver Taj Washington, slot guy out of USC. And I had a 5th round grade on Taj Washington. I think he has some upside as a role player in the slot. If you hadn't drafted Malik Washington, I would maybe expect him to contribute a bit more this year. But I think Malik Washington, that is going to be better than him and probably higher than him on the depth chart. Taj Washington might end up being a practice squad player or getting poached by another team that could use his services in year 1. Not sure about that, But I do like the pick. I had a 5th round grade on him. You got him in the 7th round. The grade for me is an A minus. If you want to see my overall grade for this draft class as well as the other teams in your division, you can go ahead and skip to the end of this video and see them there, or you can stick around for New England and the Jets, see what I thought about them, and then go ahead and get to that at the end of the video. Up next is the New England Patriots, and their first pick, number 3 overall, was Drake Maye, a quarterback out of North Carolina, UNC. I really liked Drake Maye. He was my QB2 by a relatively significant margin, and getting him at 3 as the 3rd quarterback taken is good value for me, even though I had a top 3 grade on him. So stylistically speaking, this should be a B, but it isn't. I have this graded as a B plus because getting the 2nd quarterback in the class in my rankings as the 3rd quarterback in this class is a good value. I really like Drake Maye. I think he is way more pro ready than people are giving him credit for. People are acting like he's this just completely raw prospect that only excelled outside of the pocket and by making plays using his athleticism and outside of the structure of the offense. And that's not what Drake Maye is. Is he a perfect quarterback prospect? No, because that doesn't exist. Is he someone who I think is going to start day one? Yeah, probably. I don't think Jacoby Brissett is going to beat him out in terms of just actually playing the game of football. I just don't see that happening. But I guess they could go with the veteran guy until they end up like 2-6, and then they throw Drake Maye in there. That's probably the way the season is going to go, even though I would probably just start Drake Maye from day one. Your second pick in the 2nd round, 37th overall, was Jalen Polk, a Z wide receiver out of Washington. And this is a little bit early for me. I had a top 75 grade on Jalen Polk, I think. However, I really like the fit, and I know that it is also a massive need for this team. And also there was a run on wide receivers at the end of the 1st round, so people kind of got pushed up the board a little bit. So I'm not going to beat you up too much because I do really like Jalen Polk. I think this is a guy who can be a quality number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. I really like him as that sort of player. Worst case scenario, I think he's a quality number 3 wide receiver who gets you like 600 yards and 5 touchdowns every year and is just a really consistent football player. And all in all, I give this grade a B minus, even though it is a little bit more of a reach than that grade would suggest. Your 3rd round selection, 68th overall, was Caden Wallace, an offensive tackle out of Penn State. And I didn't like this pick at the time, and I don't like it really now either. This is one of those picks where either I'm going to look like an idiot or the Patriots are going to look like an idiot, because I had a 6th round grade on Caden Wallace. The grade's not going to be good in terms of the actual selection. I think this is someone who kind of struggles a lot of the time, especially in the run game. He was actually decent as a pass blocker, but not anything special. Might have to move inside to stick around in the NFL for any significant period of time. I don't know. I don't get this selection. There were a ton of other players I would have rather taken at this point of the draft. I mean, this is the top 75 range in my grading system, and you took a guy I had graded in the 6th round here. This is not a good pick for me, and the grade reflects that. This is a C grade. Up next in the 4th round, your first 4th round selection, you took Layden Robinson, an interior offensive lineman out of Texas A&M. This pick isn't as bad as Caden Wallace. However, it is still a reach, in my opinion. I had Layden Robinson graded as a 5th round player. However, taking him in the fourth round, not that big of a deal. I think he's a big, powerful guard, struggles with quickness and stunts, but that is something that can be coached up. It would not surprise me if Layden Robinson ended up being a starting guard in the NFL relatively quickly. However, he is a bit of a project like that, but there is still starter upside in my opinion. But I did have a fifth round grade on him, so the grade is a B minus. Up next, your second, fourth round selection was Javon Baker, a Z wide receiver out of UCF. And this was a lot of people's darlings of this draft class. I know Brett Coleman and his co-host EJ were also very high on Javon Baker. I think they might have even had like a second round or late first round grade on him. There was a lot of people's like star diamond in the rough kind of guy, and I just didn't see it. I think he's the classic wide receiver. I get open a lot, but I also drop the ball a lot, and that generally is not something that changes at the next level. Generally speaking, if you drop the ball at the college level, you're going to drop the ball in the NFL. And I still think he's a quality player. I still think he has upside as a role player, but I don't see wide receiver one upside, which is kind of the way I saw a lot of people talking about him. I also don't even really necessarily see wide receiver two upside. I think he's a complementary piece in an offense as a Z wide receiver. However, I did in fact have a fourth round grade on him as a Z. So the grade is a B. It is a pick at value. And moving forward here into the sixth round, you actually get back into the positive here, in my opinion. 180th overall, your first two sixth round selections, you selected Marcellus Dial Jr., a cornerback out of South Carolina. And I had a fifth round grade on him, as he is someone that I think could potentially develop into a starting caliber player long term. The grade is a B plus, but he is someone that I think is a good bet, so to speak, where I think he is someone who's probably a special teams player in year one and year two before developing into a starter later on in his rookie contract. And then what happens after that, I don't know. But he is someone who I think can play on the outside. I think you also could potentially see a move to safety for him at some point. But that's all speculation at this point. As a corner, I had him graded as the fifth round grade. So the grade is going to remain a B+. Your second sixth round selection was Joe Milton, a quarterback out of Tennessee. And Joe Milton, I did in fact have a draftable grade on him, and I did in fact have a sixth round grade on him. I don't necessarily think he's going to end up being a tight end or moving positions. I think he's probably going to try to make it as a quarterback, and potentially, if his ego will allow him to accept that he's probably not going to stick around on a roster for all that long as a quarterback, you could maybe look to see him change positions. But as a quarterback, as a sixth round quarterback, I had him graded as a sixth round quarterback. The grade is a B, but I still think that he has upside as a player and can actually provide value as a quarterback, especially in a division that has Josh Allen. Like, he's a clone of Josh Allen, physically speaking. I think they're both 6'5". They're both pushing, 230, athletic, cannon arms. This is someone that you can use in your scout team that can play like a Josh Allen type of player while also still having upside as a backup quarterback. The fact of the matter is that Joe Milton is the sort of quarterback that ends up going on day 3 where he has all the physical tools. And even though the tape wasn't that bad, it was not good enough to get him selected any earlier. Joe Milton is one of the more interesting career arcs for me because he started at Michigan, and I still, to this day, don't think he played that bad in 2020. The fact of the matter is that the offensive line was ass, and he played like a young quarterback. I think that Joe Milton, had he stayed at Michigan, probably just would have gotten buried on the depth chart, though, because Jim Harbaugh changed his philosophy. So Joe Milton was, in a sense, is the kind of player where the transfer portal really, really helps him, because he does not get drafted if he has to end up staying at Michigan. He probably doesn't even get drafted if he has to stay until he can graduate from the University of Michigan, even though I do think he was a grad transfer when he graduated. But he then got that extra COVID year as well. So all of these things compiled into Joe Milton becoming a draftable quarterback, and it's real kind of interesting, that story arc, at least in my opinion it is. Your final selection was one of the best picks of the entire draft, in my opinion. In the 7th round, 231st overall, you took Jaheim Bell, a tight end out of Florida State. And I had Jaheim Bell graded as my 4th overall tight end in the entire class and a top 100 grade. I think this is someone that probably, in terms of like realistically speaking, isn't actually going to be a tight end. He's going to be a big slot wide receiver, but I have that guy graded as a tight end, and those type of players where in college they do sort of line up as a tight end, but in the NFL they're going to end up being a big slot kind of player. I really like those guys. I don't know why. They just seem to sort of be my kind of player. I think he's a very good athlete for the position, and I had a top 100 grade on him, and you got him in the 7th round. This pick is an easy A+ for me. And if you want to see my overall grades for this class and all of the other classes in this division, or you can go ahead and stick around through the New York Jets and then get into that. The New York Jets are on the clock here, so to speak, the final team that we're going to be talking about today in this video. And we're going to start, of course, with the first round selection, 11th overall, after swapping picks with the Vikings, falling back one selection. You guys took Olu Fashanu, an offensive tackle out of Penn State. I had a top 20 grade on Olu Fashanu. I believe he was my offensive tackle 4. I was still high on him. A lot of people fell off of the bandwagon for him as the draft process went on. That to me was a classic case of prospect fatigue, which I have done my best to not fall into that sort of belief system where the prospect fatigue. Generally speaking, I sit down, I watch a player, I grade them, and then that's the grade that I have on them, and I don't really change my opinion. Eventually, those grades can get adjusted slightly because of stuff like the combine or off-the-field issues, stuff like that. But generally speaking, once I've watched the film, that's the grade. And Olu Fashanu's film said top 20 pick all day, every day. Not as athletic as some people thought he was at the combine. He was still good at the combine, but I think that was where the beginning of the, we're going to slide him down the board here a little bit sort of started. But I never really slid him down the board. I like Olu Fashanu a lot, especially because he gets to sit behind Tyron Smith, hypothetically speaking, for a year. And if there is a player that I was going to comp Olu Fashanu to, I don't think Tyron Smith is a bad one. I think Tyron Smith a little bit bigger. I think Olu Fashanu a little bit quicker in terms of feet and stuff like that. But this guy has franchise left tackle written all over him. I really, really like Olu Fashanu as this pick for the New York Jets here. I had a top 20 grade on him, which meant value is from 11 to 20, and you took him at 11, so the grade is a B. Up next, Malachi Corley, a wide receiver out of Western Kentucky, which I am realizing right now I didn't actually put his college in the graphic. Oh well, I'm not going back to fix it now. I don't have time. I liked Malachi Corley. I think he was my number 2 slot receiver behind Malik Washington. I believe I had a top 50 grade on him. A lot of people were talking about him as like a sneaky surprise first round pick. I was not on board with that. To me, he always felt like somebody who was going to go smack dab in the middle of the second round. Now, he ended up falling a little bit, which is very good for the New York Jets because I think he's going to be able to come in and play and contribute right away for this team. As I already said, I had a top 50 grade on him. That would make this grade a B plus. You did not have another pick on day 2. You only had that third round selection. So moving on here to the fourth round, you have Braylon Allen, a running back out of Wisconsin, and this is tremendous value for me. I had a top 50 grade on Braylon Allen. I think this guy is exactly the style of running back that in the next few years you're going to see start becoming the standard norm for like high quality Pro Bowl caliber running backs at the next level. I think the New York Jets are ahead of the curve on this. I think the team that people are going to be trying to copy and emulate going forward is going to be the Detroit Lions. And what did the Lions do? They built through the offensive line. They got a big-ass running back in David Montgomery, and they ran straight at you. I think with the NFL's defensive obsession with smaller and quicker linebackers, what you're going to start to see teams do is just run at them, and they're going to be pretty effective in doing that. And I think the New York Jets are starting to realize that that is the way the NFL is going to go for right now. So I really like this selection. I like the philosophy behind it, and I really like the player. I had a top 50 grade on him. Getting him at 134 in the fourth round is incredible value. This is an easy A-plus grade for me. Up next, your first of 3 fifth-round selections. You took Jordan Travis, a quarterback out of Florida State. This is another guy that was like Brett Coleman's darling of this draft class, where he was like, oh yeah, this guy might be my QB4. I think he's on record stating that he probably would take Jordan Travis, at least early on in the draft process, that he probably would have taken Jordan Travis over J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix. And I never would have in a million years had Jordan Travis graded that high. However, I do think he is a player that offers upside as a backup quarterback. He is athletic. The arm talent is somewhat lacking. However, he does show good leadership qualities. And the arm isn't horrendous by any means. It's not like really, really bad. But he's not someone who's going to blow you away with arm talent. He's a good player. And had he not been hurt, I probably would have had him graded a little bit higher than a fifth-round grade. But I had him graded in the fifth round, and you took him in the fifth round, so the grade is a B. Up next is Isaiah Davis, a running back out of South Dakota State University. And as much as I talked about Braylon Allen and how much I really like Braylon Allen, about how he fits what the new modern NFL running back is going to become, Isaiah Davis does not do that. And doubling up at the running back position is not something I'm particularly a fan of, even though they do fulfill different roles. That being said, what I am more not a fan of is selecting a player that I have graded as a priority undrafted free agent in the fifth round. That is something that I don't particularly like. And as I just kind of said, I had him graded as a priority undrafted free agent. He took him in the fifth round. That is quite a bit of a reach, in my opinion. And you doubled up on positions of low value. So I'm going to go ahead and give this grade a C+. Up next, another pick, 3 picks later, 176th overall, Quantez Stiggers, a cornerback out of the Canadian Football League. His story is the type of shit where if he ends up being a quality player in the NFL, they're going to make an ESPN 30 for 30 on him. To give you a quick little rundown on Quantez here, he was a big-time high school recruit, had offers to go everywhere. I think he ended up committing to a Power 5 school and enrolling there, and then his father died, I think, and he then had to drop out in order to like help out his family, pay the bills. Eventually worked his way into actually being a professional football player for the Canadian Football League, and now he's getting drafted in the NFL. And I like him. He was someone who I knew about going into the draft process. I had a 4th round grade on him because he is tremendously raw, but he is a very good athlete. This is someone, especially going to New York, which is a fantastic situation for him in terms of from like a coaching perspective and a scheme perspective, so to speak. I really like the player, I really like the person, and I really like the fit. And this is good value for me. So the grade is a B+. Last pick that you guys made, also the last pick of the draft, Jalen Key, a safety out of Alabama. Not a fan of the player all that much. I think he was really the sole reason why Alabama's defense wasn't maybe the best defense that Nick Saban ever had. He was the player that teams that when they had success, they were attacking him in the passing game. Because everybody else was really, really good. Caleb Downs, future first-round pick. Malachi Moore, future probably day 2 pick. Terrion Arnold was a first-round pick this year to my Detroit Lions. Kool-Aid McKinstry, I think, went in the 2nd round. So, like, these are all big-time NFL players. And then you have Jalen Key, which I had an undrafted free agent grade on him, meaning that I would not have graded him as a priority undrafted free agent. So this is a little bit of a reach for me. The grade's B-, but it's not the end of the world. All in all, I think this is a pretty solid class. But before I give you the grade for this class here and all of the rest of them in terms of an overall grade, we're going to talk about some of the best picks from this group of teams. For whatever reason, in this division here, there was a ton of A+ picks. However, there were also a ton of picks that I really did not like at all. So it ended up being kind of in overall grades, which we'll get to in a moment, kind of a middling sort of grades here with the exception of one team. But the best picks of this group of teams, Braylon Allen, a running back out of Wisconsin to the Jets. I believe that was an A+ grade. Cedric Van Pran, interior offensive lineman to the Bills. That was definitely an A+ grade. Jaheim Bell was also an A+. Jalen Wright, I think, was an A+ going to Miami. Daquan Hardy, I believe, was an A+. Malik Washington, Taz Washington, I think were both A-. And I threw Drake Maye in there because I think anytime you can get a player that I have graded as the 2nd best player in his position and a top 3 grade as the 3rd player picked at his position, I think that's a good value. So these are the best picks from this video here today. In terms of ranking the classes here, we'll start at the bottom of Buffalo. I have a C+ grade for Buffalo, even though they had 2 of the best picks of the entire draft in Cedric Van Pran and Daquan Hardy, that slot corner. The rest of the draft wasn't that pretty, in my opinion. A lot of reaches, a lot of taking players that I didn't necessarily think should have been taken there. So the overall grade for Buffalo is a C+. New York and New England, I'm going to kind of talk about you at the same time because I give you both Bs, although for different reasons. For New York, you had the one really good pick and the one really bad pick, in my grading opinion. But everything else was kind of just like B+, B-. And for New England, there was a little bit more give and take. I think you got some really, really good picks and some kind of honestly very bad picks. So New England and New York ends up with a B. The Jets kind of just hit for par, in my opinion, and New England, I think, hit a couple holes in one, but then also had a couple triple bogeys. So those are kind of why I've got you both ended up graded as a B. The order is not anything. I easily could have put the Jets on top of the Patriots. They're both graded as Bs. They're tied. I don't really have an opinion on thinking which class is better than the other for those 2 teams. However, Miami had the best draft class here. And I think if you watched all of the teams in this video, I think it was pretty obvious. Jalen Wright was a fantastic pick. Malik Washington was a fantastic pick. Taj Washington was a fantastic pick. I love Chop Robinson, Muhammad Kamara as well. Patrick Paul, I think, is a starter day one. The only pick that I had a problem with was that safety out of Cal, but that was one pick. Everything else I think was at least hitting par, and you had a couple of really, really, really good picks, in my opinion. So Miami ends up at an A. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. It's at this point I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagreed with me at any point or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.